Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar, and once again, this is my opinion. Now we come to the episode that I erroneously mentioned was going to be the next one the last time you saw me. And that, of course, is Diamonds, the first Valentine's Day episode, and the second appearance of Amy. Like a couple others this season, it does have an opening scene that includes a cameo from a sports figure. In this case, it's Barry Bonds. Sadly, I had to actually look that one up because, other than a couple people, I'm not that familiar with many baseball stars just by their face. And looking at him, it's like, oh, that's Barry Bonds. Oh, should have figured that. His little scene with Ray just involves him asking Ray for some change to use a phone. Ray making a quick crack about having to break $1 million, and then Barry getting into it like, what is with you guys always making fun about my salary? And Ray does point out accurately, it's like, what you guys make, it's news because it's so large. And just calling it a salary, it's like, yeah, I can see why he would try to argue that, but it's like, it's still a salary. You can argue that it might be a little bit too much, which they mentioned here, it's $7 million, but that's neither here nor there. They continue the cracks there, and then Barry decides to dissect just how much Ray gets paid, and he mentions, what was it, about 50 grand a year? Which I thought, that sounds a little low, because that's only 20 more than what I make as a security officer for a casino in 2020. So I did some quick Google. Apparently, even now, that's still around the medium for New York State, which I'm like, really? I thought that was gonna be like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. 1990s money, it'll probably be up a bit more. I'm guessing Ray's in the medium to high end for the time period he's in, because nowadays the low end is about 25 grand a year for New York. Less than what I make. Probably around what I made when I used to work at the courthouse as a security officer. And the high end is at least 78 grand. So it's like, alright, that kind of makes sense. I've heard higher, but 78 grand is a conservative highball. That makes sense. So Ray, in New York in the 90s, 3 kids, wife, living in suburbia. Oh yeah, 50 grand, that's comfortable. So they joke about it, dissecting just how much he makes per column. Like every time he hits the letter A, it's $1. It's a nice little scene, but you can definitely see why it's cut out in syndication. Now this follows into the main plot, which it includes a A plot and a B subplot. I'm going to discuss the subplot first. The subplot involves Robert and Amy. Nice to see their relationship actually shown a little bit on screen, because first time only their meeting was shown and the date was just implied, and the next episode, no mention at all, even in passing. Here, they've been dating for at least a month and a half, give or take, and Robert is conflicted on whether he has to get something for Amy for Valentine's Day. I mean, they've been together a little bit, but he hasn't been dating for a while, hasn't seen anyone regularly since he divorced his wife over a year ago. He was with her for a couple years before then. Didn't really have anyone serious, at least that they mention at all in the course of the show. So he's got to get back in there. He's like, should I get something? He finds out she's getting something, which kind of helps, but doesn't help his quandary. He's like, what's her favorite color? What she weighs? So he's trying to figure out what to get her. He thinks jewelry, which ties into the A plot. But then he decides to get her something green. Now the gift that Amy gets him, is a tie with a Smith & Wesson revolver on it, which is, at least at the time the show set, the standard police issue for the NYPD, and Robert loves it. Then he gives Amy her gift, which is an iguana. This is probably the weirdest Valentine's gift you could get someone if you don't know they actually like reptiles. And Amy sums it up perfectly. You know, with an iguana, you really don't have to say surprise. I just love the way that Monica sells it. She's all nice and chipper in the moment she opens the box. She's like, oh my. And then she freaks out a little bit when Robert pulls it out, which is weird because in a later season, she mentions feeding her brother's snake. So I guess she's fine with snakes, but lizard, or it also could just be the whole shock of it all. And then Robert pulling it out. Though I do question Robert's statement about iguanas being the most loyal of all the reptiles, or at least green iguanas. I've only had 2, and those are years ago. I don't remember them being that loyal, but I guess once you get them to the point where they trust you, I guess they can be extremely loyal. I know, like, the rhinoceros iguanas can be. I mean, there's that video that goes around. Come here, buddy. Come here, buddy. Come here, buddy. Want to go? Like a dog. So in theory it could happen, but I think it's other species that are more likely to become the most loyal of all the reptiles. Then of course you got the people with turtles that might want to dispute that. I don't think the people that free handle king cobras will be disputing it though, because that's not loyal. That's just, oh, it's Bob. All right, you can lift me, human. The A plot is where the episode derives its name from, Diamonds. It begins with this first scene after Barry Bond's little cameo. The whole Blarone family, minus the kids and Debra, are at Frank and Marie's table. At first, it's just Ray and the parents, and then Robert walks in full uniform with a paper, offers them, is like, I'm into paper. Ray makes a quick crack. Then they look at it, and it's like, oh, Robert's in there. He's arrested someone. He's like, look who's on the back of the handcuffs. And Robert is arrested no other than Frank's old buddy Leon, the unseen Leon. And this is his last mention, if I remember right, which I don't remember if I mentioned last time Leon was mentioned, but it would have been nice to at least seen him in passing in one scene. I guess it's kind of like the Morn effect without seeing Morn, where you never see him, but he's just talked about, so you just get this impression of what he must be like. Or is it Morn? It's all the fun stuff he does is off screen, so you're wondering, interesting. So it became a running gag here. It's just you never hear about him, you never see him, you just hear them talk about him. You're like, I wonder what he would have been like. Like for one of the brief flashback scenes, it would have been nice to see him, even if he was just sitting at the couch with Frank. To be like, oh, so that's what he looks like, even if he doesn't say anything. But nope. His last mention, he's going to jail for having a warehouse full of fake designer luggage, imitation jewelry, Macintosh computers. Yeah, if you're gonna make fakes, gotta make it convincing, and to the point where they're just gonna read them like, oh, Mac, it's the real one. Now the fun part of this comes in that we find out that Frank bought Marie's engagement ring from Leon, and it's a fake diamond, it's glass, which of course leads to Marie saying she's gonna replace the diamond. And Frank's like, no, you live 40 years with that, you can live another 10 at least with it. And she's like, nope, I'm going shopping. You're gonna be amazed at your generosity. Which ties into an earlier episode where we find out that Marie's been putting money away from Frank's checks little by little over the years, and she has a lot saved up. So we know she's going to dip into that. Frank doesn't really contest it, so he probably does know a little bit about the money, or at least thinks about the existence of it. So he's probably thinking, she'll probably dip into that. Of course, if he did dip into their actual joint money, he'd be like, Marie! Now, to continue with it, you could see as the scene is playing out before Marie leaves, you can see that the wheels and Ray's head are turning, and you're like, oh no. Turns out Ray also bought Debra's engagement ring from Leon. Partially due to Frank going, hey, go to Leon, he'll give you a good deal. And partially because he got a pair of golf clubs thrown in, whereas Frank, as he puts in, got snow tires. So now Ray's in a quandary. It's been a couple of years since they've been married, but he doesn't want her to walk around with glass on her finger, and she doesn't want her to find out and think that he did not care about her enough to go to a real jeweler, which, from a more modern perspective, this is one of the things where I'm like, alright. And I'll get into that later when it actually becomes more apparent. But you can understand why Ray wants to go through the lengths he's going to go to. He's going to try to get the ring, which he fails the first couple times, which one of them leads to one of my favorite little exposition gags where he's trying to get her off her while she's sleeping, so he goes and gets butter, wakes her up with a light, like, hey, want to play Baker in the Mine Shaft? You'd think that it's going to blow up in his face, but nope. She goes, sure, but I get to play the baker this time. And then the next dialogue, it hints that it was a fun night for the pair. And man, it just shows that Ray can be creative in the bedroom, even though it was a later episode we find that I guess Debra doesn't always enjoy that creativity, only if it does add to the excitement. Then I'm guessing Baker in the Mine Shaft does. Just makes you wonder, what did Ray do with that butter? As you can imagine, Ray eventually does get the ring away from Debra when she's in the shower because she puts it down. Doesn't want to pull a whole Apollo 13 commander wife on it. He has to do it like, I can imagine as he's sneaking, put the Mission Impossible theme over it. Dun, 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 dun. Of course, he oversells it once he does get the ring, and Debra says something, asking for a towel. He definitely goes back. That should have been the first hint to Debra later on, like, oh, he might have taken it. Of course, once she realizes the ring's gone, Debra does the sensible thing, starts throwing stuff around the house trying to find it. She asks Amy for help when she shows up briefly before the whole iguana fiasco. She keeps looking around, then Ray comes in. He's all happy. You can tell, oh, he got the ring fixed. He's got a new diamond on there. He's going to try to put it in there. Debra comes to tell Ray she lost it, and Ray's nonchalantly trying to play it off like, did you check the sofa? And then a bigger bombshell is dropped because Debra sets Ray down and tells him, you know, years ago when you gave me that ring, I had the original stone replaced, which, once that happens, the look of realization comes back on Ray's face, and he's like, oh, crap. She didn't go out and buy a new stone to put in it. Her grandmother, when she passed, had willed her ring to her, so she just took that diamond and put it in Ray's setting. And the reason was because she could already tell that the diamond wasn't the best. Later dialogue suggests she probably knew it was crap and that Ray was trying to get the best he could, but she didn't want to show her parents that stone because they weren't crazy about him to begin with. Which, this is where that thing I mentioned earlier comes in, and that is this whole thing about it being the cost of the ring that is more important than what it's supposed to represent. I don't know if it's just certain circles in the United States that have that thing, but to me, it's more what the ring represents for the couple, regardless of it being same-sex, traditional, even menage a trois. I don't care what the dynamics of the couple are, as long as they're together and the ring is a symbol of their relationship and their love. That is what the ring is supposed to be. Not supposed to be this whole, oh, you got to spend 3 months' salary on it, huh? That seems more like De Beers propaganda just to sell diamonds. As we all know, you do your research, you see diamonds aren't as scarce as the De Beers people want you to believe they are. They just have a good stranglehold on the supply that they can create the demand. If they didn't have that stranglehold, diamonds wouldn't be as expensive. And then this whole the cost thing, it's like, looking at it, like, so that part just has me shaking my head a little bit as I'm watching this now as an adult. But the rest of the humor involving the situation and how the characters are reacting as they see what's unfolding, alright. Ray never states how much he spends on the new diamond, but we find out that the diamond that he threw away without realizing how expensive it was, bad. Now it also makes me wonder, did he, once he get a hold of the ring, take the diamond out himself and then take the setting? Or did he take it in and then the jeweler tried to tell him, hey buddy, blah blah blah, and he's like, no, I know it's fake. It's like, alright, you're lost. That would have been interesting to find out. Well, when Debra realizes it's not her grandmother's diamond, which I'm guessing Ray got a completely different color or did not try to get one that at least looked like it could pass. I mean, if he didn't want to tell Debra, he should have at least got one that looks like it could pass. And Debra was able to tell just by looking at it. Ray being Ray. And she reacts the way you would expect. Like, you changed the stone. Which gets into an argument with them. Like, you should have told me when you changed it. Why didn't you tell me? Because I love you. Why'd you change it now? Because I love you. Which is understandable why both sides did it, but it connects back to that whole thing about it being more about what the diamond costs and not what it represents. And you would think by the end of this scene that they do realize it's more about what it represents, especially after their little arguments interrupted by Allie showing a Valentine she got at school, and their little dialogue after that. But as the epilogue shows, nope, they're going through the trash to find the diamond. Which I guess because they want to keep it in the family, which from that aspect I can understand why Debra's making Ray go in there to find it. But when it comes to the simple cost and not what the diamond represents, you know, just for a couple purposes, like, they didn't learn anything. Nice little funny end moment, though. It's one of those scenes you could probably also cut out in syndication. It doesn't change anything other than the ending dynamic of the episode. And of course, we get that one bit of dialogue I mentioned a couple episodes ago. Here's a ring finger. Makes me wonder if that's an ad-lib that Ray just came up with just for a last dark humor and laugh. Or if it's actually serious. Could you imagine Ray finding a ring finger? Ring finger! And afterwards, Robert having to set Ray down. So tell me, Cubby, you found the body in there. How'd it make you feel? It made me feel... Alright, buddy. As a whole, Diamonds is a pretty fun episode. As a interesting main plot. The B plot is engaging and continues their little dynamic. We only see Frank and Marie once, but they're there for what they have to do. The whole thing about the cost of the ring, at least for me personally, just has me shaking my head, which I think that's a combination of me being older plus that whole thing not being what it once was. It's more a 90s and before thing, at least how I'm viewing things. But as a whole, everything comes together to make a pretty fun episode. I don't know if I'd put it in the top 10 of the season, but it is an entertaining episode. And you could tell, at least by this part in the season, that the writers and the actors are starting to get their stride. They do good performances. They work off each other well. And it makes for a fun episode. And that concludes my review of diamonds. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you do want to support the channel, I do have the PayPal link down below. And if you want to request any individual video reviews, whether they be film, video game, or whatever, you can also send it through that link. Till next time, guys.